Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Wilmington Wildwood School Building Project meeting calling to order on Tuesday, December the 3rd, 2024. Seeing we do have a quorum here this evening, we are live streaming. This meeting will be recorded as always and available for members of the community to watch afterwards at their leisure. But to begin, we will call order with roll calls. Please.
Diane Allen, here. Greg Bendel. Kate Bissell, here. Dr. Brandt. Kevin Kyra. Michael Camosio.
Here.
Justin Couchet.
Here.
Mary Ann Galezzo. Nick Golden.
Here.
Christine Holleran.
Here.
John Holloway. Dennis Kelly.
Here.
Paul Melorani.
Here.
Craig Minor.
Here.
Christine Murray. Here. Judy O'Connell.
Here.
Christine Pendergast.
Here.
David Ragsdale.
Here.
Paul Ruggiero.
Here.
Stacy Scott.
Here.
Eric Schlegel.
Here.
Stephen Turner.
Here.
And myself here.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to item number 2 this evening is the approval of our minutes from our last meeting, which was November the 19th, 2024. These minutes were distributed earlier, last week rather, sorry, as part of the information package for this meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the November 19th.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
There's no. Sorry, yes.
Through the chair, there was a discrepancy on the meeting minutes. It did state that Paul Melorani made the request for abutters, and that was actually Stephen Turner. Mr. Ragsdale brought that to our attention. Sarah amended the minutes and sent them over to the superintendent's office. I'm not sure if they were forwarded yet to all of you, but they have been revised.
Don't know that they did go out. Just checking. I don't think so. But with that one change, looking at the motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve subject to the amendment
Thank you.
being made.
Seconded.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? Thank you, and thank you for that clarification, Julie. Roll call, please.
Diane Allen.
Yes.
Kate Bissell.
Yes.
Glenn Brandt.
Yes.
Michael Camosio.
Yes.
Justin Couchet.
Yes.
Nick Golden.
Yes.
Christine Holleran.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Paul Melorani.
Yes.
Craig Minor.
Yes.
Christine Murray. Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Christine Pendergast.
Yes.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott. Yes. Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
Stephen Turner.
Yes.
And yes for myself. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. Item number 3 tonight is a design update, and we'll turn it over to Ronnie.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. So the preferred schematic report, we received the comments. It was actually the date of the last time we all met. So we've had a chance to review the comments. So the report itself, it was submitted on October 23rd. We received those comments, as I said, November 19th. And then tomorrow we'll actually be submitting the responses. So we've been working to just compile the information. I don't think there was anything out of the, typical comments that we tend to receive from MSBA. Also just with having the facilities assessment subcommittee meeting, we had already heard some of the comments. So we saw some of those just in writing as we reviewed the comments. And so, a lot of it is just asking for clarification on information. We had certain options, for example, that were for cost estimating only. They still asked us to just submit the diagrams that went with them for, things like that. So we are putting that package together to go out tomorrow. And part of the comments is they will talk about the different variations from the guidelines. So that space summary that we reviewed that includes all of the academic spaces and program spaces within the building. MSBA gives us their guidelines, which is their out of the box formula for the student enrollment. So you plug it in, they give you a number. And then they ask you to go through and we went through with the district after developing the educational plan to come up with all of the programs that are specific to Wilmington. A lot of times that is like the special education spaces, that's very specific to Wilmington. And every district has these specific spaces and specific programs that we go in and add into the program. And that's what was submitted. And then MSBA comes back and they'll tell you what they feel is reimbursable, that extra square footage, and then what they think is ineligible for reimbursement. And we have talked about that even when the project budget was put together. We made assumptions knowing from our previous experience, spaces that are typically excluded. For example, CARES, it's an after-school program, so they won't necessarily reimburse for that, but it's still allowable in the program. The good news, they did not say you can't do anything. There are spaces that they identified as potentially, well, that they identified as ineligible for reimbursement right now. So for example, if you look to the second to last row, which is the total building net floor area, in PSR, we submitted 109,000 square feet. The out of box building for MSBA for our enrollment would be 75,000. So there was a delta of 33,000 square feet. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see kind of a breakdown of the major portions where they said of the 33,000 square feet, about half is considered ineligible. So under core academic, for example, they have teacher collaboration spaces. They are not saying all of it is ineligible, but they're saying 2,700 square feet of it is ineligible. Portions of the extended learning area, they said 2,000 of that is ineligible. Health and physical education, the additional 6,000 square feet for the gym was identified. For admin and guidance, right now they're saying the reading and math specialist would be ineligible. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then other spaces are pre-K, the extended learning areas, the teacher wellness rooms, and then CARES offices. So all of that totals about 15,000 square feet. So for example, the reading and math specialists, like we're gonna go back in the comments and say to them, you know, this is part of the educational program, even though MSBA does not have you categorize that under your core academic or under special education because they're serving both populations. It's in the spreadsheet, it's under administration. So we'll go back and just say, you know, we kind of request that you reconsider this. They may or may not, but we can always try. So we're going through and justifying what the program is or saying, yes, we acknowledge that you are saying this is ineligible.
So I'm gonna ask him. All right, this is a lawyer question. So can we say 1,000 feet of those teacher collaboration spaces we're gonna use for art and music? Is that?
No, but we do have a strategy, right? Because after this first round, right, where basically it's come down, there's 1,000 square feet on the table that's eligible within that program category. So we have a couple of ways that we're approaching that. One of the things that we're looking through, just from an educational program standpoint, you've heard us talk about the flex classroom that we had. And the reason we had one flex classroom was because when we did the schedule, we just didn't have quite enough program to get a high utilization. So we were trying to use that flex space for both art and music. And so going through user group meetings, we knew it was a challenge going in. If you think of those types of programs to live in the same space, all of the art supplies, right? All the music, the acoustical. So we've been kind of challenging ourselves to try and come up with that space. And at the same time, we're kind of running through a scheduling exercise again to kind of re-verify all of those things. So right now we're tentatively thinking we may need to put an art room back in because of the difficulty and challenges. We don't want to water down both programs just to try and co-locate them. So that's a potential for that 1,035 square feet because we need the other art room, not just the flex classroom. The information that Ronnie was talking about with relation to the reading supports in those spaces, we're gonna do a gentle pushback with MSBA and acknowledge the fact that they've cited them as ineligible and outside of their normal program. But they're very critical programs to Wilmington. They were here before this project. They're gonna be here after this project. So we're gonna go back to try and push back a little bit on support. So that one's a little bit in play. The teacher collaboration spaces, they always keep those out. They're very much supportive of that space, but they don't generally fund that yet in their rules and regulations. The extended learning areas, our strategy on that was they give us a maximum size per classroom of 1,000 square feet. We size our classrooms at 900 square feet, and we took that extra 100 that they would reimburse, and we allocated that towards the extended learning areas because we knew that was an eligible space. So we did pick up some there using that strategy. The other thing that I think is important for context is we did know that there was going to be ineligible spaces here. So when we gave you our local share numbers, when we had that meeting, our calculation and assumptions at that time were there would be about 12,200 square feet of ineligible space. And we're at 15,000 and we're pushing back on 2,400 of it. So we're trying to get back to status quo and we're reporting out, this is kind of where we are in that negotiation process with MSBA. Their first review, they've cited these things. So now we're coming back to them, pushing back on some, acknowledging others. Some of them we certainly know, the gym, for instance, but we're pretty close at this point, which we think is pretty good.
I think it's important to note that when we receive these comments, we look through them thoroughly and then we share them with school leadership, and we kind of go through them with a fine tooth comb. It is really our job to advocate for all of you. These are spaces that you really feel that you need, reading specialists, math tutors, that these are things that are critical to this community. We will advocate for you to the MSBA in our responses back. And our hope is that they see and understand that the town of Wilmington is different from the town next door that didn't need this. And there is a reason behind it. And, that's provided in the documentation that we send back. And we'll know more, in our SD submission, as things further, go along.
Yes, sure, Steve. So two things. One, first of all, I didn't really appreciate the fact that 19,000, almost 19,000 is eligible. So it's a very good sign of that. And again, it speaks to some of the things we talked about. There are things that they don't consider by default, but they do regularly allow. So I think that speaks really well to the design so far. I would also be curious about the two extended learning areas and if there's ways to push even harder on those two as well, in addition to the reading and math, the offices for those support teams. Because they are so core to the vision of the educational program.
They do. Our experiences, right? We're in this position a lot where we kind of see this and we gently push back on some things. So we know some of the things that they will have a discussion about. The extended learning area, because they know and everyone else tries to utilize that strategy too, to try and get some of that back. They're like, well, we're really kind of giving you, some of that anyway. So we will push back and we'll ask again, but I'm just highlighting, based on my experience, those ones are usually pretty solid for them where they're deeming those ineligible.
I would just say from experience, having taught at the middle school and the high school, there's been a demonstrated effort on the part of Wilmington Public Schools to address MCAS in reading and math for almost a decade now. So, I mean, there's definitely coursework and demonstrated history where Wilmington has put a concerted effort in those particular areas and just trying to enhance our special education offerings and our extended learning. So there's absolute curriculum that could map to that to show that we've been doing that as an educational practice for a long period of time. So I hope that they would reconsider that. In terms of the teacher collaboration spaces, the whole means of designing schools in 2025 and beyond is supposed to speak to not only just teacher collaboration amongst different disciplines in different academic houses, but also for student collaboration. So this kind of goes counterintuitive to what the whole design of the educational spaces seem to be. So I would think they would be fostering that in a bigger way and opening up their minds to what they're funding. So anything that you can do to gently push back as you phrase it certainly would be appreciated.
Other questions regarding the space?
I'm just confused about that last column that says difference. Are we not worried about any of those numbers in there?
That's the total we're talking about. So the first column under PSR, right? That's the program we submitted. The second is what their guidelines are. The box kind of vanilla for everybody. And then the difference is, once we put our program together compared to that, in those specific areas, those are the overages. When they calculate that at 33,000 square feet, that's over our box. Normally, they would be ineligible. We agreed with half of it based on your program narrative and support of your program.
Yep.
These other 15,000 square feet, which we just went through, they're saying those we're not buying yet, and those are still ineligible. And so now we're gonna take another run at it and see what we can get back out of that.
Gotcha.
Just to clarify and follow up on that, there is always some that's ineligible.
Always.
Yeah, okay, so it's not unique at all.
We're gonna be on the board.
Right, we're just trying to maximize what we can get as a project and get all of our program and get as much reimbursement as we can. And we certainly recognize, and they are very articulate coming back, like our regulations aren't set up for every single person's school, right? They kind of put it right down the middle of the road on what their program is, because everyone has something that's different. So we work from that, and they, right, to come out of the first half, and they've accepted half of it. There would be years not too long ago where we get pushed back on some of this, and they'd say, those teacher collaboration spaces, we don't even want you to build them, you know, as part of our project when they're trying to tighten everything up. But they've come to see that that program is very valuable. Lots of people are doing it. And I wouldn't expect in too much longer that you're going to see some of these types of spaces become part of the out of the box program.
I think
Quick question would be, so is this normal, like, it's a negotiation, obviously PSR is what we come in at, they come back, and is it always that the give and take on that final column and it's just the MSBA's way of doing things, and you're gonna get some stuff that they give everybody that may not be showing up now, so some of that is normal things that they will give up on and give some money back on, if that makes sense?
They're pointing out for us as clearly as they can right now, saying, based on the program you gave us at PSR, we're just highlighting, these are potential ineligible costs from our viewpoint. And so we're going back and re-justifying, these are really important to our program. And they're gonna come back and either agree with some of those or not and say, yes, you really need them. They were there before, they're here, and maybe they will. But typically, they're just drawing a line in the sand right now and saying, we just want to shine a light on these facts so everybody's aware that these are local share costs, they're outside of the box, and we are going to work through it, and we have this phase to do it. Because when we submit the program at the end of schematic design with the plans, right, you'll have that meeting with MSBA and they'll say, this floor plan is locked down. The square footage you requested for your program that you need, you're going to build. Don't come back, you know, during your rest of your design work and you say, oh, well, our budget's changed or something, and now we don't want that extra extended learning area. You've asked for it, you know, gave us a whole bunch of backup information on why it was important, so that's what we're living with. So this is the important phase for us to make sure that we're comfortable with the program. This is our bite at the apple. Make sure that, like, the flex program discussion, I think, is a really good one, to make sure that we're making the right decision, not just to be so conservative on space today that we are going to potentially affect the use of that space when two programs are in there, but do the right thing and think through it with the scheduling and make sure that we have the right amount of spaces. So that's right where we're at right now, that fine tuning. And we're just trying to highlight for you, kind of, these are the areas that MSBA is recognizing. It lines up pretty close with what we estimated for local share. So I think from a cost standpoint, we're right in the wheelhouse with everything we've talked about at this point.
I give Judy, did you have a question?
No,
Dan?
Yeah, so that 15,018, what is, do we have a number for the total square footage of this building?
Yes, 163,573.
We don't have a cost per square foot.
It's approximate. I think the construction value is like 800, 878, 880, right in that range.
880
Cost per square foot.
880?
I know that when we built the school, we were able to negotiate an appeal for the music program, the music space here, because we had a real world need for that. And I think similar to what Judy just said about, you know, our initiative at CAS and getting those scores up, if we can tie that with a real world need, you know, maybe we get some traction.
That's what we're trying to do. We're just, these are the highlights. We are going to gently push back and see if we can get them to take more of this 15,000 square feet on. This is where we are right now.
Stephen, did you have another question?
Dr. Bradley, I just wanted to circle back to Dennis's comment. So what Lee was mentioning was that, you know, we're on a kind of a timetable, and I just don't want to jump ahead to the schedule, but I do want to point out that that time is approaching, right? It's April 3rd when we submit our project scope and budget agreement to the MSBA. So, you know, we're going to be sending our estimate to the estimators in February. We get that back, we reconcile it. And so that project scope and budget agreement goes to the MSBA on April 3rd. So that's the lock-in date. So if we're making any adjustments between now and then on those spaces, I just wanted everyone to be aware of, you know, we say that date's approaching, you now know the date, it's April 3rd. So,
Did you just add our to-do list on this? Really about changing the program square footage is about that flex space discussion, whether we're gonna add that extra art program space or not. This discussion, right, is just a matter of playing around with local share dollars at this point. And us trying to get as much of that back as we can.
If the art room needs to come back in, that 1,000 square foot would fall into reimbursable, correct?
It would.
It would, so we-
That's that minus 1,035. That's kind of what we left on the table in that category.
Someone's phone just fell.
That's mine, thank you.
And folks are watching it, for those watching at home, but I don't see any questions, so. Oh, sorry.
So after we do our back and forth, there's going to be something that comes back as ineligible. Is there any expectation about whether we simply go forward with that because we've said we need it and we were pushing for it? Or would it be, or do communities then often go back and revise some of their plans and just say like, well, I guess we're gonna have to live without this, this, and this, and cut some things that are deemed non-reversible?
Sometimes they do, and it really becomes down to the value judgment about what you're trying to do with your ed program as part of this project. And so, those discussions at the building committee level, when we are at this stage, and how important are these items to the program? How important are these items to keep in as part of the project? And we believe the team that's been working on programming up to this point it's all justified space. We've taken a round where we actually took an art room out in our second round of this, trying to be as efficient as possible and say, let's try and multi-use with space and see if we can save some square footage. In our truth testing, we're finding it difficult to co-locate those two programs. That's why we're saying we may have to go back to add the art piece. But yes, committees do have those discussions about, do we truly need this as part of the ed program? Have those decisions. Those are the discussions. If there are going to be changes to the program, we should be having.
If I can just add too, one of the things that it has occurred to me, and forgive me if I mentioned this at one of our last meetings, but it's clear that we need to do some kind of crosswalk, if you will, between programs and personnel across the three schools and where they're landing in this new facility. The reality is we're bringing three schools together, but we have a number of professional staff that are housed at the Wildwood or housed at the North, and they need a home. And they don't have office space across the building, across the common at the new town hall school administration building. So we're taking offline through the schools. We need somewhere for those folks to go. They are sprinkled. That's just an example of sprinkled into some of the square footage here that you're seeing, that we have to account for folks to have a home base somewhere. They're going to be servicing students in the school, but we need a place for them. And some of that space is not eligible for reimbursement. So that's one of the areas, but just at large, it's clear to me that sort of that crosswalk will be helpful for not just this committee, but also the community to understand. We've got a lot of programs, we've got a lot of people coming into this building. The last point around the teacher collaboration spaces, well over 100 staff that are coming together. They need places to work, to meet, to have break, to have lunch, and that's not all going to fit in sort of one space for teacher lunchroom or staff lunchroom. So that is part of the spaces that are being captured right now or carried in the collaboration spaces. Might we be able to adjust or trim a little bit here or there for some of those? Possibly, and we're trying to look at that. But it would certainly, that's an example where we can't just cut all of them up, because we will have staff that won't be able to meet anywhere else but, a hallway or a corner of a classroom that's occupied. So that's what we're trying to balance.
I think it's helpful to keep in mind that just because it's deemed ineligible doesn't mean that it can't be part of this project. It just means that as MSBA, they try to make it where universally they are trying to extend their funds through all different communities and all different projects, that this is the, pot of gold that they have, and how do they distribute it fairly and equally and equitable. Doesn't mean that we can't include it, doesn't mean that we should eliminate it. I think all of these spaces are well deserved, well important, and should be included. It just means that our share of it is part. That's all that it is.
Just as a point of clarification, what you have presented here is already baked into the number that we've issued out to the public.
Correct.
So this 15,018 of ineligible
So-
footage is already baked into the.
So
price.
our assumptions when we were calculating the local share without the benefit of MSBA giving us this information, we calculated at that time 12,200 square feet that they would kick back versus their 15,000, right? So there's about 2,800 square feet different. Our cost range was pretty high. We're right in the middle of what we've said here.
Understood. So I just wanted to clarify that, and then I think it bears repeating that because something may be ineligible doesn't mean it deems it unnecessary. So I think it just speaks to, really thinking about the integration and how people are gonna fit into these spaces. And for example, the gymnasium is an easy one to talk about because it's been talked about so much. I mean, they're not reimbursing for 6,000 square feet, but the community has clearly spoken that they deem that to be necessary and a value.
Yeah.
So.
MSB has many mechanisms that they're going to cap and control and deem ineligible. The program's one, right? They have other ones. They have a cap on the maximum cost of construction per square foot that they fund. They have site caps, right? Because every school in the Commonwealth, their sites are all different and what those development costs are. So they say cap it at 8%. So as we go through this schematic design process, right, our job is to highlight to you these different areas that we see. So this is one. When we get the cost estimate back, we're going to come back to you and match that up and say our site costs are X amount of dollars. And this much of it is over the cap of what MSB caps everybody. So we're going to keep track of what those caps are and what the local share values are to keep comparing back to what we assumed when we made our initial assumptions.
Just for the other points, the 163,000 that's there now is also down from where it was initially because there was a lot of work done in the smaller group meetings about the space summaries and those sorts of things with real interrogation of do we need that space? Yes, no. And that led to a significant number of square feet coming out of the project as well. So I do think there's been a lot of effort to date to get to this point with a really valid sort of number to be looking at. And like you said, it ties in fairly well with what you've been forecasting.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Brian.
At the last meeting, we were asked about the extended learning areas and there was kind of a question about it. So we thought we would just revisit that again, just briefly. So the extended learning areas came from the guiding principles that came out of the visioning sessions that we did early on. And it was to provide a wide variety of instructional spaces, including traditional classrooms, small group rooms, and extended learning spaces with strong visual and physical connections between these experiences to facilitate a wide variety of instructional practices, varying group sizes, opportunities for inclusionary practices for student support services. So at the end of the day, these extended learning areas, they're an extension of the classroom. They allow for different environments, different group sizes, different activities to happen throughout the day. And it's also an extra space for inclement weather, especially for the littles, as they're coming in to have some space to be able to have movement and some areas to play and interact outside of the structure, the classroom. So there's a couple of images on this slide here, just to give you examples of what some of those spaces look like. The top right image is one of the wings of the plan, and it shows different furniture layouts to give you an idea. Some have smaller tables, some have a projection screen, some have different types of seating to allow for different groups and different gathering. In the center, we've tried to include this area here, a couple that are facing each other, if you will, for larger group gatherings. And then you have some that are further away to allow for a bit more acoustical separation when that is preferred. And then all of these different images are from different projects. Here you'll see, different types of furniture. This one actually has a little green area for production. Different structures for seating and movement. The biggest thing about these is flexibility. If whenever we can, we try to build in as much flexibility as possible. The area you see here has tables and chairs. You'll see that they're on casters. They can be moved around. The blocks in the back, when we were visiting the school, there were kids that were pulling them out to start building and playing and interacting with them. So they're all different and used in different ways. The image in the middle here, there was a big push for bringing the library out to the different classroom wings and have age appropriate reading accessible to the students. So that was one of the things that district chose to do. And then at the bottom left image, you'll see the ability for projection, for gathering, for presentations. But these are all what used to be in the hallway and what and the reason these extended learning areas have become so important is that they give a purpose to the area that's now in the corridor, where before when teachers were trying to incorporate breakout spaces and the kids would just go sit on the floor in the hallway, now they're actually designed to be able to accommodate the students and give them the support that they need. As well as being an extra space for any support services so that a student that's being pulled out doesn't feel like they're being taken to another area to be provided support, that they can do it within proximity of their cohorts.
There was a question raised at our last meeting of, are these really corridors, or, and why we have some angles on a couple of the rooms and it looks a little funny. Well, we're doing it on purpose. In that image that you see in the top right, where we do have a pair of classrooms on an angle, the reason we're doing that, is so we don't have just a long straight corridor, creating the opportunity to be able to have those extended learning areas and those little nooks. Also, one of our requirements with these buildings is to be able to have natural views to daylight outside and view corridors. So being able to turn that a little bit and open up a couple of opportunities to get some blazing opportunities to get daylight into that corridor space, right? It's a prerequisite for us on some of the lead scorecard stuff. So there are reasons we're doing it. Dennis, I hope that you're happy as you see this plan evolve. You'll see our lines do get straighter, right? And all jots and ends, we straighten it out. And that's what we're working on right now with the plan, is really working on trying to get it as efficient as we can. Where we're stacking space, we talked about adjacencies last time. We're chasing some square footage out of it right now that we're over on plan. And it's going to take us a little bit. There are some opportunities that we see, and on that slide where you saw the 33,000 square feet, right below it was like 55. That's the gross. You've heard me talk about that kind of markup from net square feet to deal with corridors, wall thicknesses. That is really our kind of canvas, that any opportunity we have to be even more efficient. So what we're working with right now is that kind of gray space to make it as tight as we can, find opportunities where sometimes just because of the building layout right now, we have corridor areas that are wide just because we don't have enough program space to stack up 3 stories to get it all. So we're moving stuff around. There's opportunities for us to get some of this net square footage into some of that gross square footage space that we're carrying right now to try and get some efficiency. So we hope to be able to show you pretty soon a new layout with all of the changes from the user group meetings that we've had, us shaking out the building as much as we can. And placing it on the site. We have moved it on the site a little bit south to try and get some more space for potential geothermal wells located closer to the boiler room. So there's a lot of things going on where we're trying to make the building as efficient as we can to keep right in our wheelhouse where cost is.
So I really appreciate this. Thank you, because I actually was appointed to the committee way after the visioning. So like this is the first time I'm seeing this actually laid out like this. It looks great. I guess I want to know, like last slide talked about inclusion, like as being priority here. So like how is that being met by having these spaces? Like our students with different access to education can be served by this, and
it's a great question.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, a couple of things to reiterate in responding to your question. I mean, as Lee said, the effort here is just to try and sort of pause and make sure that there's a collective sense and understanding from the committee around what these spaces are. I mean, just as a reminder, and it's great, Nick, you weren't a part of the the inception of this was through visioning and the opportunity for people to see images, both on boards and on pictures, as well as in person when we had many people from the community out to visit more contemporary modern school facilities. So that's how we arrived at this this notion or conception of these and the inclusion of these. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I wasn't here at the time the construction was underway for this school. So I didn't have the opportunity to be in the old school, but I have to believe that these spaces are somewhat akin maybe to the small flexible spaces that are in between classrooms on the upper floors here, that I'm going to guess weren't in the old high school.
Right.
And I think that there's a parallel here because, they are here and they're being used as part of sort of a newer, more modernized view of how can we support breakout spaces and collaboration. The same holds true for these extended learning spaces. Touring around classrooms as I do and have the good fortune to do frequently, and just earlier today to one of our early childhood centers, and being in a classroom where there are 2, 3 or more adults working off to the side, sometimes in a corner, not to be dramatic, but that's right in squeezing in. That kind of inclusionary support, push-in support could easily happen for a period of time in some of these spaces, and then that child or children could go back into the classroom. So these can absolutely support that. And, you mentioned earlier, Lee mentioned earlier that there was a decision to downsize a little bit the classroom spaces to 900 square feet. This is an effort to try and capture some of those spaces so when they're needed, they're there. So I think there's a lot of uses, and I know some of my colleagues around here who saw them can speak more to them, but I think there's a lot of value here to them.
One of the things that came up in the earlier meetings was just the dramatic shift in how children with special needs and special educations are provided the different services. In today's buildings, they go all the way across the building or down a floor and go into this other room. They're really pulled away from their class by doing as much as can be done in the spaces near their class. It's much more of, hey, you're just gonna step outside and do this for a little bit and then come right back in. So it creates more of a way to keep them integrated. And it's addition to the 2 small rooms inside the classrooms provide the same sort of functionality in different ways. Some have doors, some are open spaces, but they're all kind of can be isolated and can be separated without being remote. And that was one of the key things from a special education perspective from DESE, right? That the children who receive any sorts of different services need to be as closely integrated physically as possible to their classroom.
Thank you.
I think the other piece with that, with the extended learning areas, and this is something just, it's a level of trust, is that you have the support staff to support these extended learning areas. So for example, having taught at the high school, if I had students in the next room, they were young adults, I could have them independently be next door and I could toggle between my instruction and know that I could put a few students over there and I didn't have to worry about them wandering off. Same thing at the middle school, I had to keep a closer eye, or if I had a teaching assistant with me, I had a little bit more flexibility because I could put that TA in the other room. At the elementary level, I'm assuming that the programmatic design is going to be designed to support these extended learning areas so that the square footage is actually utilized and it doesn't become the exception, but it's part of the everyday. So just to say it out loud, is that assurance there that these extended learning spaces will be able to put into practice on a daily basis? I'm not suggesting, and don't want to be mistaken that I'm saying that they're a luxury, but if they're built into the space, is the programmatic design going to be altered to harness and embrace that new environment setup?
I absolutely could speak to that, but I'll look to my colleagues here.
There's only so much staff.
No, but I mean, I get to see
Yeah.
this in action, but
Yeah.
I don't want you just to hear from me,
Yeah.
but I mean, Kate, I'll put you on the spot or Diane is here.
So I would say, to be fair, right now I only work at the early childhood level and all of our classrooms have multiple adults for pre-K and K. So we are in a unique position to support that use by virtue of the programmatic design. Glenn was with me this morning visiting the Wildwood, and we do have classrooms that had, when we walked in, there were 5 adults in the room, and there are some students who need to take a break. Sensory wise, that classroom gets to be too much for them, and they're taking a walk all the way down and out and around the corner. Versus maybe here they can go outside and there's a sensory space right outside the door of their classroom. And they have an adult with them already to access that, but it's something that's much more appropriate. And instead of being gone for 7 or 8 minutes, they're gone for 2. I think to work in the intermediate school, and I think certainly just like when I was in elementary school, there are teachers who say, oh, good, you three go out in the hallway and read your book and talk together about it. And that still happens, but they're sitting on the floor leaning against the wall. And now they can sit on a bench and do it in a chair that's designed for sitting on instead of floor.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like I said, just, you know, I'm not, I don't realize that there are just five adults in a room, like,
We're talking about.
Not everything.
yeah,
But some.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's a very good point, sorry. In part of the introduction of a new building like this, particularly for the grades above the first pre-K and K, is working with the teachers to introduce them to the space and how you can use the space in that sort of scenario you just described. There is a learning process for the teachers as well. It is a different building, it will function differently than the current ones would. So there's a learning for that as well. But I think it's a really good point.
And just to jump on that, we have talked, the team's talked about that very thing in terms of professional development, and to acknowledge that if we land here, and hopefully we do, with a degree of extended learning space, we have the time and the ability to plan effectively with our educators so that there's the lead time to prepare. And Lee and his team have shared some of the other projects and some of the same sort of professional development and training to help bring up to speed educators that haven't had these same spaces to be able to work with before, and just to think strategically about how best to employ them. And I think that will come naturally to some educators. It may not to others, and that's okay. But we have the time and ability to plan. I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore, but.
Yeah, I think professional development is a critical component. MSBA is highlighting it as much as to everyone who will listen, right? Is to get the best utilization out of these spaces, right? Some training is involved about how to do that. And the other thing I think is important, because you bring up a good point, right, of staffing levels and the ability to have students inside the classroom versus outside the classroom. Another design feature of this is the passive supervision piece, right? Where we put glass in those corridors so that the teacher still has passive supervision through the glass of the students that are working right outside. So we spend a lot of time on those view corridors to make sure that that works. So that's also a really big piece of it. My last point, because I think we've talked a lot about this, that white space that you see in that floor plan in the top right corner, that's the teacher collaboration space. Another really important aspect of what we're doing here is we're bringing 3 schools together, right? 855 students plus, right? Staff, a lot of people in this building. It's big, 167,000 square feet, little kids. We're trying to break the scale of this for the experience of the users down as much as possible. So these are really, to your inclusive point, Nick, really meant to be like a house, right? It's like a one-stop shop. Right, support services are coming in here. The teacher collaboration is within that suite, right? It's going to feel more homey than if you're in this giant cavern with long corridors, right? And that's a big part of what we're trying to do.
Creating smaller neighborhoods.
Right.
Other questions on the extended learning space, and we're not spending too much time on it, but again, make sure that members of the committee are comfortable. It was a great question, an important one that was asked. I'm sure others may have had that.
I'll only say that I've seen it put into action on numerous projects, and I know the team here can speak to it as well. But from my perspective, it is one that doesn't take as much professional development as necessary, only because it is an exciting space that they didn't have before. And they very openly would like to enjoy it and utilize it. And it's a great opportunity to have, push out and pull in opportunities with certain students that have some either special needs as far as sensory issues, loud noises, need a 5-minute break, a quiet place, or need a little bit of guidance on reading quickly and put them back in, where they don't feel isolated and taken away from the group. They're just stepping out for a moment. And usually the schools find it very easy to accommodate and work within their programs.
All right, moving on to visioning and some exciting work. All right, it's nice.
We're gonna pivot a little bit, but we have brought some boards, as some of you started to do a little sneak peek here. We're actually going to look at exterior and landscape today, and we'll come back for interior next week or in 2 weeks. But what we want you to think about here is the materials that you're seeing on these images as you walk around. What we're here looking for is feedback from you on the direction of the aesthetics. So we're not necessarily saying this is the exact material, but if enough of you go around and put green dots on one image, we're gonna look at that image, we're gonna see and like what materials are used there, what's durable. We'll come back with some more information with, you know, the ones that were the favorites and break those down a little bit more into detail. But right now, we're just looking for what is catching your eye right now. So you can look at the materials, the colors, you know, is it like this dramatic piece or is it more of a serene piece? Is it more calming? You know, how simple is it? Or are they like you're getting your eyes are drawn to the more intricate design? Looking at the roof line, some of these are flat, these are pitched. There's curves, some are more angular. And then the different patterns, and the patterns can be the repetition of the windows. It could be the pattern of the material, you know, so there's all these different feelings that we're looking for from the images. And we just want to get your feel for what you're aesthetically drawn to. We're also looking for what feels like it belongs in Wilmington. So, you know, as much as everyone has personal preferences, what feels like it fits in the community as well. So this is gonna get you to stretch your legs just for a few minutes.
Just to add, there are no wrong answers. You cannot make any mistakes, right? And I just lay this out, right? It's really hard to design public projects for a really diverse set of parameters in your audience, you know, not only for just this SBC, but the community in general. So we just try and pick up movements, like what is your gut reaction when you see some of these pictures? We've got some beneficial history here, right? We've done this once with this building, right? And so we've actually gone back into archives and pulled out all of the stuff that we used for kind of information here to generate that. We did a lot of work going out of town, looking at the architecture. So we've kind of assembled some things that we think kind of fall within the range of stuff that we're thinking about right now. And stuff that we hope to see if you guys like any of it or really dislike any of it and don't want to see it in the future. So no wrong answers. We really appreciate the feedback. And, you know, we hope to build on this, you know, next time we come in.
What are the color differences?
Here come the rules.
Okay.
So I'm gonna switch one of the boards. We're actually gonna use 5 boards. So we'll use the 2 here and we're gonna use, I guess, maybe the 3 in the back. They're duplicative. But I realized something, so we're just gonna go with the 5. And so I'm gonna have everyone break up into groups of 3. I'm gonna do this actually this way. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. No, we need 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Glenn, you're 5. Sure. And Diane, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but Chuck, you want to participate?
Sure.
Okay, so 1 and 2. And so we'll go to the board with your number, and that's where you'll start. And then every 3 minutes, we're going to keep count, and we're going to have you rotate to the next board until you get to see all 5. And what we're hoping to do is have you look at the images, think about all of the things that we just kind of went through on the previous slide, and you have dots. So the orange dots are, you can put it on an image that you're just not feeling, or you could just not put a dot on there and we'll just take it as one or the other. The blue dots are something that you might find interesting. You're not sure if you love it, but I would say it's interesting, but in a more positive way versus the negative. So that would be a blue if you're more neutral to it. And then the green are things that are really catching your eye that you're liking and you want us to know. There's also Post-its on the chairs, and that will give you an opportunity to write notes, and you could stick it on an image if you don't want to just say, like, for example, you look in the image, you're like, I love the brick, I hate the window pattern. Let us know. You could write that on the note. And then on there also, you have a comment sheet. So when you're on a board, they're numbered 1 through 5. You can also add comments on that if you just want to give some general notes based on what we're seeing. So there's lots of different ways, because I know it's hard to everyone get a copy of them.
Our sheets say 1, 2, 3, 5.
They do.
There's no 4. you want us to write it where Board 6 goes?
Sure. Well, you could change, the 5 to a 4, and then is the next one 6?
Yep.
Instead of having printed, that could be 5,
I
and
just want to make sure we're all on the same.
thank you.
It's just, it does say, it says interior.
Cross out on text.
You can just go with the board number.
Okay,
So when 5's complete with 5 go to 1, you're gonna go right to left.
yeah.
So one, go to one, rotate.
Are the
we're
virtual
gonna
people
sign you.
participating in any?
They're not, so the way that we're gonna do this, it'll take about 15-ish minutes, so if you're not here in person, we're gonna send out the file. For those that were not here, so that.
But I like FaceTime Christine in so she can walk around.
She'll be able to provide her.
She'll get a PDF.
Yeah, she'll get a PDF if she could do
But
it.
yes, you can do that.
You could if you want.
So group 1 goes to board 1, group 2 goes to board 2.
So- Before you guys get started, I'm just gonna move one forward.
Story is. Oh, is that how we're doing it?
Yes, and if you need more docs or post them, they are around.
I just wanted to get this right.
Yeah.
I think you love it. But no, that's my favorite. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully you appreciated being able to move around a little bit of the meeting. So we're gonna take all of this information back. And next week we'll come to look at what the common themes are that we saw based on the dots and the notes. And we'll look for a consensus on, you know, what we're gathering as those themes that you all agree. And between now and then, we're also gonna send out the document, the boards to those that weren't in the meeting today so that they have an opportunity to respond back to those as well. And then next week, we'll also look at the interior imagery. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, everyone, for your participation.
Ronnie, do you think you could send that to everyone, just the people who are remote?
Yeah.
I think at least I'd like to look at it again.
Yeah, definitely.
May I ask some comments?
Sure. No.
Okay, thank you. Moving on the agenda, item number 5 is the school building committee, committee meeting calendar. And you'll note on the agenda, we are trying to be more focused on listing where a vote or where action of the committee is requested, and this is the first of a couple tonight. At the last meeting, there was some discussion around trying to return to take a look at the long-term view of the school building committee meetings that try to create as little overlap or conflict as possible with other standing committee meetings that are scheduled in town. And so, so that's been done, and a new refreshed view of this building committee schedule or calendar has been put together and it's included in the packet. And I'm trying to Julie, or talk about this.
Yeah, so if you notice the first page has the meeting schedule, but if you look at the second page, we took the opportunity to go through with the town, determining when finance committee meetings are, select board meetings are, school committee meetings are. And as you can see, there was definitely some struggle with trying to find some dates that work within the parameters that we need for this project. So that's just kind of the exercise in how we got to the dates that we chose. You go back to the meeting schedule, there's also, in that meeting schedule, it tells you what we're going to be talking about for design during those meetings, so everyone's prepared and knows. So for example, the next meeting on December 17th, there's the interior and exterior design presentation, similar to what you just did. So I think it's helpful for everybody to know in advance what we're going to be talking about. It's also helpful for Doran Whittier because we need to make decisions. We need to make them, relatively quickly. I mentioned that project scope and budget agreement date, which is the beginning of April. And our SD package is due on April 24th to the MSBA. So there's a lot of things that we do need to decide. Things that will be, shook out and refined further in design development after the town vote. Hopefully our successful town vote, right? So we've scheduled those meetings here through April, the end of April, to get you to town vote. So
I'm happy to make a motion to accept this proposed meeting schedule presented.
Second, we have a motion, a second, comments, questions, discussion. Okay, well, thanks collectively to everyone who I know played a role in helping put this together. So we are looking for a roll call. Sure.
Diane Allen,
yes,
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brandt,
Yes.
Michael Comosio,
Yes.
Justin Coucher,
Yes.
Nick Holden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Malorani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Christine Murray, yes, Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and yes for myself.
Great, thank you, everyone. Moving on tonight to the next item number 5. Also, the action requested in committee tonight. This has to do with construction manager at risk committee formation. I'll turn it over to the manager.
Thank you very much. So, as folks know, the committee voted to go with the construction manager at risk at the last meeting. SMMA worked to put together the request, the application to go to the IG's office, which I believe went on today to the IG's office, and are preparing the RFQ to go out on the street next week. The leadership team had discussed the creation of a committee to evaluate the RFQ proposals. We believe the appropriate size would be a 5-member committee. Dora Whittier and SMMA would be on that committee, and per the MSBA's guidelines, there's 2 spots. So we thought there would be 3 other spots. The folks that we had proposed to put on that committee would be Paul Ruggiero from schools, myself from the town, and then Marianne Glazzo from the finance committee as the other 3 folks on that selection committee. So I'm hopeful that the committee at large would agree to go with that composition of a selection committee to narrow down those CRS.
Thanks, Eric. Judy?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve that construction manager at risk committee formation as outlined by the manager, subject to a second in discussion.
Second. The first, we had a couple of seconds.
Third, I'll do third. All right, discussions for one question. Paul, this is budget season. Do you have time for this?
We'll make time.
Okay.
He's in at 6, you can get in at 5.
Fair question. Great answer. Thank you. Motion in a second. Roll call, please. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, before we roll call, just can you please restate the names again? So it was Paul and Marianne, Eric, who else?
And then the SMMA and Dora Whittier.
Lee and Julie.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
David?
So just assuming that Marianne is aware that
She's not here.
that we're
I did speak with her today about it, yes.
That's why you show up.
Yeah, you don't show up.
What do you think about taking committees? She's also buying drinks.
certainly end up.
There you go.
All right, we have a motion in a second. Roll call, please.
Sure. Diane Allen,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Michael Comosio,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Nick Golden,
Yes.
Christine Hollard,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Christine Murray,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul, are you sure?
It wouldn't look good if I said no.
You're on it.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and yes for myself.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to those that are stepping up and serving on this important committee. Speaking of committees and work, we have the next item of business, which is working group updates. For those that are tuning in at home, not only is this committee at large working hard, but we also have a number of members here who are working as part of smaller working groups. And as always, we provide an opportunity for update on their respective efforts. We'll start with the public relations working group.
Sure, I will turn it over to Justin to give our update.
So the public relations working group has switched to every other Monday meetings. We've been meeting with Dawn Whittier and SMMA. We met yesterday, we took last week off. We met yesterday and went through some upcoming events where we feel like we can try to make a presence, possibly get some boards set up for maybe having something at the tree lighting this weekend. Or at the Festival of Trees set up at St. Thomas. We also created like a small chart of different outreach mechanisms that we have, and each one of us is responsible. So anytime a press release has been approved by the leadership committee, and I know there was one last week, I believe, we sent that out this week. So I took care of the town crier and the patch. We're working with Pause. I'm gonna look at my notes here. The Apple, Facebook pages, the town website. So we each have kind of a unit that we're working with individually to make sure that these press releases get updated. I know that Also, we talked about early in January, reaching out to Cartoon EDU. They have done those kind of 2-minute modules. And to reach out to them to talk about the next one, and then see how we can get that out to the public once that's put together. So
Also, the boards and the flyers will be part of the special town meeting date as well. So those will be available during that time period as well.
and we did kind of work backwards to make sure that we're going to meet the February water bill to get something out for the February water bill. So I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we needed something by mid-January. Is that right?
We need something produced to town hall in mid-January. So the hope is that we have something set up by the end of this month, or that we talk about what it'll look like. I'll get that to Shasheen for the beginning of January, right after the holidays, and then we can have them produce it. So that's, I think, our next meeting item. Justin, I don't know where we stand with, if there's any, I think we requested at the meeting, Julie, if there's anything that Dorn Woody thinks is relevant to put on a simple, like, think, 1/3 page flyer.
Yeah, I think our intent is to try and have something, the big first or second week of January that we could have you produce. But I would ask you to reach out to Judy O'Connell,
I
because
was just gonna say that we had a conversation today that since internally in the town, there's some transitions, and I'll get us a better understanding for our working group on Monday, hopefully, the timeline that the town needs in order to make sure that the flyers are included as part of the water bill going out in February.
Great.
But that's our intent, to work towards getting another, even though the information might not be very much pressing or new as far as we've been distributing, but at least to be able to stay relevant and raise the expectation that inserts will be inclusive of the water bill going forward, and especially as May rolls around, and that will be the more crucial one.
Great, thank you, everyone. I'll just add, we have the boards as well that will be distributed at all of the elementary schools for conferences. They're happening this Thursday. So there'll be a lot of foot traffic at the schools, and so we'll have those commission boards available at all the school sites. All right, thanks everyone for that. Next is a sustainability green design working group.
So I'll touch on this. Right now, we have a few members on the committee, Michael Comosio, Fred Miner, Dennis Kelly, and one of his team members, member from Reading Municipal Light, is also on that committee or working group. And Christine Pendergrass has other commitments going on right now, so she's going to step off. So we just wanted to give an opportunity, if there is any interest, for others to join. The sustainability working group, we would love to just give that opportunity now. We try to meet we haven't started yet, but we will be meeting every other week on Wednesday around 10 a.m. for approximately an hour. The intent is to review the sustainability goals, look at the LEED certification and the different requirements, and making decisions on what makes sense to include in the project, because each of those pieces may have a cost impact. And so we look at those. Also, MSBA offers incentive points. And so that's a big part of this, is looking at some of the decisions that we're making and how it will potentially affect the incentive points. You have the opportunity to earn an additional 4 incentive points with the green measure. So that's the main goal of the group. Our primary focus in the next few weeks is going to be the mechanical system. We'll be looking at 4 systems, also geothermal, and whether or not it makes sense to include that into the project. So, there's going to be a lot of detail that group goes into, and the hope is the detail will happen at the working group, and then that group will come back to the SBC to make recommendations, and we'll do an overview with this group, but it won't be into the detail that the working group would potentially go into.
Question for Ronnie about this working group?
Just clarification, when you say 4 points, that's 4 percentage points.
Correct.
Correct? So that's a significant impact potential.
Did I hear you wanted to join that? committee?
Paul said he wanted to if he didn't want it.
I'm interested. I may need to get back to you though.
I heard Marianne was interested.
Yeah, she's not here.
Who else is in here?
Greg and Kevin both want. Let me get back to you.
Sure. Great.
But if others want to step up, I would certainly prefer.
Yeah, I'll just say these are really important committees that are doing really good work because this is a large group. It's a very large project and we have a short amount of time, and to push all of this information through this large group would be really difficult in our current meeting schedule. So they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They're working directly with our engineering consultants as well as we put this forward. There's another working group that we'll talk about, which is the site and landscape working group, to talk about all of the stuff that's outside of the building as well. And so
I know.
the idea here, right, is those working groups are gonna do all of their homework and come back with their recommendation to this group. And, we're gonna be filtering in all of that data, but that's gonna help us advance all those groups doing the fine detail work on the side, meeting every week. So very important stuff.
Does anyone want to talk a bit more about site landscaping?
We volunteered.
Yeah.
So the next working group that we're looking to form, so this one doesn't have any members yet, so don't rush to volunteer, but yes, we need volunteers. Is site and landscape. Did Nemis volunteer? Every group.
I volunteered someone for it.
Yeah.
David McGaldy from the DPW, when I spoke with him about it, he seems very interested in, I think he'd be the perfect person to be out in the town.
I agree.
And especially where he'll be taken care of eventually.
No, definitely.
I would second that. I mean, it's so huge. He's an arborist. He's been very involved. He's handled, obviously a lot of the projects, but did get entitled in a lot of the exterior work and is still doing it, even the expansion that we're doing over at the Textron site. And Dennis at best, his team's gonna be inheriting the project, from a workmanship afterwards. So he would be such an integral part of that group.
I'll just say, not to put any of you on the spot, principals that are sitting around the table, this is a really good opportunity. Your insight is really kind of critical to that kind of day-to-day operation of what's going on inside and out the building, the playgrounds, how you get from here to here, bus drop-offs, pickups, all those things that are going to be really important to you. And we will seek you out regardless if you're not on the committee, because we do think that it's really important. So, just having that grasp, if it's possible at all, the data it's a big piece of it.
I'm happy to be on it. I'm not on that committee, but I'm happy to be part of it. Fantastic. Gotcha.
I have a question. Will you be forming a interior design committee as well? Is the intent to do it that way as well, or just?
That one is going to be coming a little bit later after SD when we get into more of the details and the furniture stuff, because furniture changes like every 6 months to try and keep up with it. We'll have the latest and greatest.
Good. So one quick question, Ronnie. Not that I want to come join this because Jamie will be on it, but when you look at like the buildings coming online, this building here, when it opened, every building now comes with a concrete jungle. And in this area, ice melt and concrete don't go well together. And we ended up deteriorating quick. So if you look at a lot of the concrete around here, the first year we opened was in the middle of winter, and that concrete got damaged immediately. And if you use the fertilizers and the things they say, when it's really cold, it doesn't really melt ice. Is there any other products that, besides concrete and asphalt, that can be shoveled and snow blowed and for walkways that holds up with them?
This is the big question we face on every single project, and my colleagues that are out doing this in schools will agree. It's really hard. One of the things that we've seen beneficially with the geothermal systems is because it is so efficient and you're running hot water loop, but sometimes we run in certain areas where the entry plaza is, or under a playground, a minor heating loop, right? To keep that stuff melted and clear and dry. So that's one way you can start looking at it. But there is a period of time, right, where you can't use solid green concrete, right? Or you can avoid the warranty. So it is an issue. We do have we have a whole meeting segment dedicated actually just to this and the maintenance of that stuff and what the options are available. So we're gonna get to that. That'll be one of the topics in this group is, what does that look like? And maintenance is a big thing, right? You're obviously well aware of that, but we'll be preaching that at all of these things. It's not just the initial cost. It's like, who here is gonna be able to do this stuff? And really thinking through, it's not just what looks pretty from a landscape, it's gotta be maintained and taken care of. So that type of thinking, coming from the subcommittee, that's what we're looking for, right? To kind of truth test all of this stuff. And that is the excellent point that we face on every project. So.
Yeah, if you don't know to look for it, you probably don't notice it. Over here in the big area, but go to the loading dock, you can really see where, and there was nothing else we could do. So I'm glad you put some thought to it, but I don't think there's many options.
Sure.
The heating little thing sounded good.
I know we got a contractor in the audience, and I'm sure he's heard that story many, many times about opening up, new buildings with issues to solve.
That's it.
Well, there is a town in the Netherlands that has steam heat to all the houses in town and it runs under the sidewalks to get to the houses.
Yeah.
So they never have to shovel their sidewalks.
Yeah.
So let's
What if-
redo the whole town.
Well, I was just
I'm all
talking
for
about
it.
geothermal. The point made about geothermal is if you could strategically place a few of those loops, that could eliminate some of the most problematic areas. It might be more, obviously, cost trade-off. So, yeah.
Discussion, right?
Yeah.
That's what we'll be doing.
I think he just volunteered as well.
Another one we're gonna seek out even if he's not on it.
Okay, well, if interested, we can certainly follow up, with, at least at large for those that might be interested. So thank you. The next item tonight, discussion correspondence or new items. Anything members of the committee would like to put forth? Okay, seeing none, committee questions, we're ready tonight. A lot of great questions, Mr. Chairman.
So, outreach to abutters. Have we had any follow-up outreach to the abutters in the last, since we were here on the 19th?
No.
I said I'd ask every time.
Outreach to the abutters. However, Doran Linear does have, as part of the process, they will be reaching out to all the abutters and having abutter meetings. I don't believe that those have been scheduled yet, but.
They have not. As soon as we get to a reconstructed site plan and we've kind of landed the building where we think it is today, we want to bring them in early and say, this is where we're at today, and we'll go through that process with it.
Roughly when would you anticipate that might be?
January.
Okay, very good.
And for the people who are abutters who can't make it to a meeting, we have some kind of communication, a flyer or something like that that you can.
I think we'll do the same process like we put out a meeting schedule here, right, and get it adjusted. We're gonna try and do that as best we can with that specific group of abutters, right? And we will meet them where they are, right? If we have to come down on a Saturday, because that's the best time to meet them and go through that stuff, we will. So once we get to a point where we've got something to share and have that discussion with, we'll assemble that list and start communicating with them to find out some things that work for them.
One thing is, I think is gonna be super important is that the abutters have somebody that they can contact with their concerns. So if you're able to provide a phone number or an email.
Sure.
I don't want to hear anybody say, I can't get a hold of anybody, nobody's talked to me.
Yeah. Sure.
So one thing just to add to that, like in the meantime, and your comments are well placed, and even, what you're saying, Stephen, is that the flyers, if you recall, all the flyers that are out have the town manager's office. Currently, right now, we have the website, we are fielding the emails that are coming in and they are being addressed. We have received calls to town hall. I took one, I know Eric's taken a couple as well. We are speaking directly to the residents. One of them did see one of the consultant trucks on site and called and said, is there any concern? I'm seeing drones, I'm seeing work being done. Is there an issue with contamination? And we, I educated him that we were working on a school project. He literally, is the neighbor to John Doherty on the right-hand side, for example, so he's very close. And he was most concerned, like, what's going on? Is my view outside my back window gonna change? And that, that was as basic as it was. And he said, okay, can you send me the information? I received his email address. I sent him information about how to learn more about the project. And he said, now I'm gonna start to pay attention. I'm gonna learn more about this. I just wanna know what's going on in my backyard. Very amicable. So anybody and everybody that if you're talking to people, just direct them to the town manager's office. We can certainly involve Glenn's team as needed as well, but that just kind of coincides with what is out on the flyer that we're actually distributing. So that's why we're saying to have them call into town hall, and Eric and I are both calling people back directly. We're not having administrative staff do it. It's primarily Eric, and I'm taking calls as well, and we'll put them to the right person. Certainly when those abutter meetings happen, I would assume there will be some involvement with the town and the school side in those endeavors as well, but we want to speak to anybody, as needed, anytime. You can direct them to us. We are actively taking those calls, and they've been going well.
It's true. Just a definitional thing. When you say a butter, do you mean literally touches the property, or do you mean within a certain feet of the property? Because some of the housing lines in our town are very wonky. You'll get, a hammerhead lot that doesn't touch it, but it's just as close as some of the other abutters.
There's certainly the direct abutters that we're gonna get from deed research when conducting our survey. We have a list compiled for that. I think we want to reach out a little bit broader net than that. There's certainly the direct abutters, but everyone's impacted by a project of this magnitude. And we want to be very transparent, listen to the concerns, and knowing that we're not going to be able to address everything. And I think, having those conversations is really important, right? We're under an MSBA project we recognize this is a big deal. And we want to get as early as we can in front of them to do our best efforts to mitigate any of the concerns that we have. And I think it's really important to keep track of all of those things, minutes and a checklist to be able to say, yes, we took care of that, fence line or tree, whatever it is, that the concern was. But I do think, I think we start with the initial property abutters, and then we're gonna cast a little bit greater net, because more than that's just impacted.
Yeah, please, thank you. Especially noise and all those things of construction. I mean, I would think it's almost the direct, and anyone who touches a direct. You get to, from 23 to another 38 sort of properties. Yeah. And obviously the Avalon that's right abutting it as well. Basically, it's that whole complex. Yeah. There's one building, but it's the whole complex too, so.
And maybe you could do, like you said, Saturday, and you have something at the cafetorium in the north. And then you can step outside with people, and if they have questions and show during daylight. So invite all the neighbors into the north where it's right there. And then they can go outside and see approximately what you're talking about and give them a better idea on site.
Yeah, you're bringing the snowshoes, January.
Hey.
Take a little march out there.
I'm hoping that's last year's January, not
Maybe jump on the gun on this too, but we have a plan to survey that property and put in markers early on. You can mitigate any kind of issue.
Yeah, well, there's two parts to that question. I think, the first part is the survey and documenting where the boundaries are per the deed, and any discrepancies we find with abutters, right, to start addressing those now. We haven't thus far in our research to date. The second part of that, is also just as important to be able to figure out. I lost where I was going with that. The second part of your question.
Are we going to install markers, property markers, so that people know early on?
Right.
I don't want to wait until we have shovels in the ground before we can.
Right. So I think we have placed benchmarks where the survey is, and what we're going to be able to see is, are there issues where we're seeing stuff from property lines spill over onto school deeded property, to be able to highlight those and start having those conversations of what we want to do to address those. The other part is before we start construction, right? And I think that's one of the benefits, the choice that this group took with CM at Risk, because they do a really nice job about it, is surveying all of the properties, video surveys, right? Talking to them, that communication link between the contractor, the design team, the owner, I think is going to be really important. And being able to say, this is what we started with, right? And if there's anything that's happening after, that's all documented, right? And it's part of and incorporated into the project. So I think there's two pieces to that. That second piece we'll talk about further, as that develops. But we have, with the survey, we have benchmarks down, they're visible. And when we get that finalized, we'll be able to come back, and where we see issues, right? I think that's where we start addressing them with the abutters.
Thank you. All right. Public comment is the next item tonight, with one member. All right, audience tonight, but all right, anybody online?
No.
Okay. Next meeting is December 17th. Again, we will continue to be operating these meetings hybrid here in the large group instruction room. And for those that cannot join, for you the aid of Zoom and our owl. So thank you for your flexibility with that. Unless there's anything further tonight, thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
move to adjourn.
All right. Second.
Second. Diane Allen. Kate Bissell.
Yes.
Glenn Brand.
Yes.
Michael Comosio. Yes.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
Yes.
Nick Golden.
Yes.
Christine Holloran.
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Yes.
Paul Millerani.
Yes.
Craig Minor.
Yes.
Christine Murray.
Yes.
Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Christine Pendergast.
Yes.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott.
Yes.
Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
Stephen Turner.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.